What if the most dangerous lie you believe right now isn't something someone told you, but something your own mind was subtly engineered to accept as absolute truth? The most terrifying reality of human behavior is that your own finest qualities, your empathy, your deep desire to do good, and your need for connection can be weaponized into an invisible cage. When an individual targets your psychological defenses, they do not use open hostility. They use your own mind against you, slowly chipping away at your reality until you completely distrust your own senses. By dissecting the precise educational psychology behind these covert behavioral tactics, you undergo an essential human transformation, shifting from a vulnerable observer to a highly aware, deeply grounded strategist. This is not a guide for manipulation, it is a masterclass in advanced psychological analysis, built to equip you with the mental improvement, absolute self-protection and awareness required to reclaim your psychological sovereignty. The systematic erasure of a person's autonomy frequently begins with the calculated application of selective listening. In educational psychology, this tactic functions as a profound form of cognitive filtering, where an individual intentionally ignores your logic, your boundaries, and your emotional reality, choosing only to acknowledge statements that validate their own agenda. When you attempt to address an issue, they might look past you, change the subject, or pick a single irrelevant word out of your sentence to argue against. To apply this deeply to analyze human behavior, you completely starve a person's valid points of any conversational oxygen. By offering no response, nodding vacantly, or shifting the focus entirely back to your own narrative, you force the target to work twice as hard to feel heard. This behavior conditions the target to instinctively alter their messaging, dropping their own needs just to keep your attention, effectively training them to silence themselves. Once the target's communication is restricted, the manipulator transitions into directly exploiting empathy. Human beings are evolutionarily wired to feel the pain of others and offer support, an instinct that dark psychology treats as a direct backdoor into your decision-making center. In behavioral analysis, weaponizing empathy means presenting oneself as perpetually misunderstood, uniquely wounded, or carrying a tragic past that excuses any current toxic behavior. To implement this dynamic on a deep level, you structure your interactions around your personal struggles, ensuring that whenever the other person attempts to hold you accountable, you instantly trigger their guilt. By making your emotional survival depend entirely on their compliance, you force them to abandon their own boundaries. The target becomes so consumed with protecting your fragile emotional state that they completely neglect their own mental well-being, trapped by their own kindness. This manufactured vulnerability naturally feeds into a constant need for validation, which is used to establish total emotional dominance. While normal human behavior includes a healthy desire for appreciation, a calculated demand for constant reassurance is a highly effective control mechanism. By acting incredibly insecure, constantly asking if you truly care about them, or demanding praise for basic tasks, a manipulator forces you into the permanent role of an emotional caretaker. To utilize this tactic deeply, you establish an environment where your self-esteem is an unstable variable that the target must constantly fix. Every conversation becomes an exhausting effort to reassure you of your worth, your intelligence, or your status. This constant drain on the target's cognitive resources leaves them with absolutely no mental energy to evaluate the health of the relationship, keeping them perpetually focused on keeping you stabilized. To prevent the target from realizing they are being drained, the manipulator wraps their behavior in a layer of fake moral superiority. This relies on the psychological principle of moral licensing and virtue signaling, where an individual positions themselves as the ultimate authority on ethics, kindness, or professional correctness. By adopting a condescending, overly righteous tone, they judge your lifestyle, your choices, or your communication style against an impossible, arbitrary standard of purity. To execute this dynamic, you label any disagreement from the target not just as a difference of opinion, but as a moral failing or a lack of personal growth on their part. When you frame your desires as the only mature or spiritual path, you force the other person into a state of perpetual defensiveness, making them feel fundamentally flawed and deeply eager to conform to your standards just to prove their goodness. This entire process culminates in the ultimate weapon of behavioral control, creating self-doubt. In advanced psychological analysis, this is the systematic erosion of a person's confidence in their own memory, perception, and sanity. When a manipulator consistently denies events that occurred, twists historical facts with absolute certainty, or tells you that your memory is failing, they trigger an intense state of internal cognitive dissonance. To apply this on a profound level, you confidently contradict the target's reality over minor details first, using phrases like, "You're completely misremembering that," or "You're rewriting history because you're emotional." As these micro-adjustments accumulate, the target's brain stops trusting its own internal compass. They become entirely dependent on your version of reality, relying on you to tell them what happened, what to think, and how to feel. Deconstructing these highly sophisticated dark psychology tactics is the absolute turning point for your own self-growth, permanent awareness, and robust self-protection. True human transformation happens the moment you realize that selective listening, forced empathy, and manufactured moral superiority are simply calculated illusions designed to exploit your natural desire for harmony. When you learn to trust your own memory without needing external validation, when you refuse to allow someone else's manufactured trauma to erase your boundaries, and when you recognize fake righteousness for the control tool it is, you completely shatter the manipulator's framework. By elevating your awareness through the lens of educational behavioral psychology, you transform your mind into an unshakable fortress, ensuring that you are never a puppet in someone else's psychological theater, but always the absolute master of your own reality. The moment you stop asking a manipulator to confirm your reality is the exact moment their entire illusion crumbles to pieces.